Hello and welcome to the Video Vortex. This week I'm full of a cold and there's no cinematic gold as we return to Guilty Pleasures 2. Yes, I strongly recommend you watch the first episode and come back to this one if you've not seen it already. And this is not meant to be making fun of these films, this is paying a lovable homage to them. I strongly recommend you check some of these out. These films have brought so much laughter and joy into my life, more than most films that I've seen at the cinema. So let's have a look at some of these B-movie classics. Our first film today is Pieces from 1982. There's a really nice kind of arrow release of that at the moment by a Spanish director. I believe it's pronounced Jean Piqueur Simon. And the movie stars Christopher George, who's famous for being in City of the Living Dead, where he has one of my favourite cinematic exchanges of all time, where a car pulls up and the lead actress, played by Catriona MacCall, says, "I'm hungry," and Christopher George goes, "Good, there's a lollipop in the glove box." Really kind of like gruff kind of New York style of acting. This movie is completely off the wall. Some of it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's a typical B-movie and a bit of a classic from the 1980s. It says a lot when producer Dick Randall decided to get a Bruce Lee impersonator in the movie because they thought it would sell a bit better over broad. So there's a character and it sounds like his character name is called Kung Fu Willie. He's not actually called that, but he appears for about 20 seconds in the movie just at random for no point whatsoever, so it could go into the trailer. I actually really love this movie. Some of the dialogue I can't actually repeat, some of my students might be watching. Some quite funny, mild, sweary dialogue in it. And there's just a sequence where somebody's clearly been mangled to death by a chainsaw and the detective turns up and stood by the swimming pool. They say something like, "Oh, it looks like she's been mangled by some mechanical instrument." The camera just pans to one side and there's a massive chainsaw there, as if the characters have just noticed it. This is a great movie to watch with your friends after a couple of glasses of wine or beer, and it'll be a good laugh. The final shot at the end of the movie, which I don't want to ruin for you, is a nice little surprise. It's very much in line with the ends of kind of Carrie and Friday the 13th, but that last shot is incredible. Check out Pieces from 1982. Next up is a comedy from the late 1960s, a film called The Magic Christian that not many people seem to have heard about, which is surprising because there are a lot of actually celebrities that appear in the movie. Peter Sellers plays the lead, also Beatle Ringo Starr is co-starring in this movie, but you also get Richard Attenborough. Christopher Lee makes an appearance, which is odd, seems though he complained at the time about being typecast as Dracula. No surprise who he turns up as in this movie. You get Raquel Welch turning up as well, and a really surprising cameo from Yul Brynner, but I won't spoil that one, it's sort of in the last 20 minutes of the movie. It stars Peter Sellers as a rich industrialist, and he decides to adopt a homeless person played by Ringo Starr, and he wants to teach him and learn what life is all about. So they go on a series of many different adventures, and he wants to prove to him that people do almost anything for money. It's a really strange scene where Lawrence Harvey is doing a Shakespeare play. I can't quite remember which one it is. It might be Macbeth, but that's really far out. Some of the camera angles are just filmed in this kind of bizarre 60s handheld way, as if they're like filming rehearsals and have put it in. It's directed by Joseph McGrath, or Joe McGrath, who's more commonly known, who was a decent little director. He appeared in some of the Pink Panther movies and was a good friend of Peter Sellers. This movie has kind of mixed history. It was based on a novel by Terry Southern. He was famous for writing Easy Rider and worked on the screenplay with Stanley Kubrick for Dr. Strangelove. And it was actually two of the Monty Python team, John Cleese and Graham Chapman, who got hold of the script and rewrote some of it. And there's some hilarious Python-esque sequences, particularly at a dog show, which is a bit like Crufts. And there is the funniest sequence I've ever seen in a movie. Now, that's a big claim. Now, this is a patchy comedy. There's like whole 20 minutes, half an hour that are not funny. But when it hits home, it's really funny. I don't want to spoil it, but it involves Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr walking into a kind of cabin on a train. And what happens in the next minute, I could not see on screen because I was crying with laughter that much and my ribs were hurting because it just seems to make no sense whatsoever. I remember watching this in a week where I just moved into my lovely apartment here in Manchester. It's like the first time living on my own, and I watched it with another film called Candy, which I think is from 1968, which is based on another Terry Southern book. It's a really weird movie. It's not available on DVD. If it was, it'd be in the list. You can watch it on YouTube for free. It's a movie which is a really indulgent, trippy film starring the likes of Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, Walter Matthau's in it. Richard Burton plays a lecturer who's based on the poet Dylan Thomas, and his character is called McFisto. Make from that what you will. Also, Ringo Starr makes an appearance as a Mexican gardener. Yeah, it really is a strange film. It's probably one of the worst films I've ever seen, but again, that has some really laugh-out-loud sequences. So check out The Magic Christian, and if you dare, perhaps check out Candy as well. Next up is Ratman from 1988, a film of which the tagline I can't say in a family-orientated show, but it's He's the Critter from the, and it's something that rhymes with Critter. This movie stars David Warbeck, perhaps most famous for his role in Lucio Fulci's The Beyond from the early 1980s, one of my favourite horror films. Pretty decent actor with a lot of screen presence from the Australasian continent. He was actually considered for James Bond at one point, very much in the kind of Roger Moore mould. And he was in a lot of kind of action films in the 1970s, a bit like Rambo type movies. I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true, take this with a pinch of salt, but apparently when Roger Moore was stalling for more money before the production of Moonraker, it's one of the biggest James Bond films, apparently they actually got David Warbeck to appear on set dressed in the spacesuit worn by Roger Moore to try and shake him up a little bit. And I don't know if any photos of that exist. I don't fully believe that, but I've read it in a few different sources, so maybe that's worth further research. This movie has another star. It has two. You get a kind of naked Italian model with quite big eyebrows in a shower in one sequence, and then you get something a little smaller, an actor called Nelson De La Rosa. I had to check his name. They're not the most famous actor on the planet, but perhaps famous for being one of the smallest actors in the business at one time, even smaller than Hervé Villechaize from Man with the Golden Gun and Forbidden Zone, which we mentioned in that last episode. He plays Mousy, essentially he's playing Ratman, who's made, if I'm not mistaken, from the sperm of a mouse and the ovum of a monkey. That's something really far out. Now, this isn't a great film. This is a terrible film. But this is a film you kind of watch as a rites of passage. It's got girls, it's got gore, it's got a tropical locale, and it's a kind of film that you won't probably watch again, but it becomes the butt of so many jokes amongst your friends in the pub. So the number of times I mentioned Ratman to students, I'd even got my girlfriend to watch a bit of it the other day, and she's a legend. I love you, Kerry, if you're watching. And she actually watched some of this. So this is a rites of passage movie, Ratman from 1988. Next up, we have a double dose of Kung Fu, which is not my specialist area. It's something that I've kind of avoided for years. These are not great Kung Fu movies. The first one here is Ninja Terminator from 1985. The other one is Revenge of the Drunken Master from 1984. Both directed by Godfrey Ho, who I'd love to buy a beer. These movies are just hysterically funny, particularly Ninja Terminator. Apparently it's like two films cut together. One of the stars, Richard Harrison, didn't actually know he was going to be in Ninja Terminator. A lot of the scenes are cribbed from one of his other movies. There's some really strange stuff. I mean, I'm going to have to read it off the paper I've got here. It's about the Golden Ninja Warrior statue that has some sort of magic powers, and I can't work out what's going on in this movie. Some of it's sped up, so the ninjas are running down steps really quickly. One sequence, you got this woman cooking a present for a boyfriend or a husband, for his birthday, and she's about making steamed crabs for him. There's a ninja who's got a blonde wig like Lady Gaga. This film was hysterical throughout. There's a scene where the main character's just walking down the street, the Ninja Terminator, and he decides to just start beating people up when he asks for directions. I can't stop smiling. I watched this movie under the influence of some warm cider. I actually warmed it up in a pan, which was perhaps a health and safety hazard watching this movie. I just spilt hot cider all down me laughing. And then I met up with my mate, went for a couple of beers, and I was laughing hysterically. That's one worth checking out. I would say Revenge of the Drunken Master is probably a better title, but it's not as funny. This is about the Blood Ninja Gangsters, starring Johnny Chan. Very much kind of Bruce Lee ripoff. It's not as funny throughout, but it's about a kind of drunken ninja. I can't really say much else, really. It's just you get a load of set pieces and strange sequences. This like ninja's like a sort of masseuse who makes rich people in these certain climes giggle, and one of them couldn't stop giggling for 3 years or something, so he decides to get revenge against him. one of the highlights of this movie is the dubbing, and the dubbing in both are funny, but I think in Revenge of the Drunken Master it's even better. Cockney accents don't quite match with the faces. So I'm not a big Kung Fu fan, but you can pick these movies up in Entertainment Exchange, CEX as it's called, in England for like 25p and 50p, and you'll get a great evening's entertainment. Put a pizza in and get some like barbecue sauce, have a cider and watch these, because I was laughing hysterically. I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit, including a box set here. This guy deserves his own show. This is the Coffin Joe collection. Now there's Coffin Joe himself. Yeah, pretty dapper looking guy apart from like the long fingernails. You want to get that sorted out, mate. But he's been compared, the director, Jose Mojica Marins, I believe that's pronounced, to Mario Bava, Louis Buñuel and Russ Meyer, and that's a decent comparison. These aren't the greatest films ever made, but they're very atmospheric and have some interesting philosophical messages. Like a lot of men, he's on the quest to find the perfect woman, and I think a lot of men are looking for that, but I don't think he quite goes about it the way he should, and in these modern kind of more feminist orientated times he doesn't go down too well with all members of the audience. But he's a local gravedigger who basically wants to pass on his family bloodline, which is quite nice, but he decides to look for the perfect woman by like torturing women, throwing spiders at them and making them take part in sort of satanic orgies and things. Now there's 3 official films with the Coffin Joe character. At Midnight I Will Take Your Soul, This Night I Will Possess Your Corpse, and then there's a much later one made in the 2000s with Universal's backing. But there's other films in the box set where the character sometimes appears in them, but it's unofficially Coffin Joe. There's The Awakening of the Beast, End of Man, which has an awesome ending, The Strange Hostel of Naked Pleasures, which I've never watched, you know, it sounds a bit dodgy, Hellish Flesh, Hallucinations of a Deranged Mind. And what's great about this particular box set is sometimes the English subtitles are spelt wrong at the bottom. There's something really rock and roll about that. The first one's a nice lean kind of 90 minutes. The other one stretches over just under 2 hours. It's almost like the kind of The Bride of Frankenstein in terms of Coffin Joe movies. They give him an assistant. It's a bit stretched out, but I prefer the first one. The DVD qualities are not particularly great, but you've got to see Coffin Joe. It's an experience you'll never forget. I watched this towards the end of university, and this kept me sane, because you're under a lot of pressure at university with exams and stuff. So check out the Coffin Joe collection. Our last film is Armando de Osorio's The Ghost Galleon. This is part of a series of films which is actually really good. He was kind of like the George Romero of Spain, pretty much kind of after the generation of Franco had been their dictator. Cinema was starting to become a bit more liberalised. You get classically a bit of exploitative lesbianism in the films and kind of racy subplots, and he made like the equivalent to the Spanish versions of like Romero's Dead trilogy, with Tombs of the Blind Dead is one, and the last one in the series, or the last official one, is called Night of the Seagulls, which is my personal favourite. It's actually quite good. Ghost Galleon, on the other hand, is not his finest hour. There's some kind of supporting actors that you might recognise from kind of like Dario Argento movies and some Lucio Fulci actors in there, but the Galleon itself is basically a model, and when it catches fire at the end, it's just clearly a model on fire. And there are other models as well. There are some bikini models that want to be photographed in a kind of ancient locale, so they decided to go onto this creepy boat. Safe to say things don't turn up too well when the evil Templar knights from previous centuries come back from the dead. Yeah, probably not the friendliest chaps in the world, but there's a lot of recycled footage from the previous movies as well, of them coming out of graves and things like that. I have never been able to get all the way through this movie. I used to watch it whilst getting ready for a night out. I've tried to do this 2 times. So I'd have kind of pre-drinks as I was getting ready. Before, we used to go to a nightclub, I think, called Fifth Avenue in Manchester. I think it was when we used to go there. I used to just chant like, "Ghost, ghost, ghost galleon, ghost, ghost, ghost galleon," as just some kind of weird thing, as me and my friends become known as the Ghost Galleon. One day I will get through this movie, but if you can get through this movie, well done to you, and hopefully if you have the power to do that, you've had the power to get through this episode. So thank you very much for watching this episode of the Video Vortex. There'll be future episodes coming up soon, a zombie movie special, underrated sequels in the work, and there is the phone ringing right now? Perhaps that is the evil Templar Knights. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.